All right, I've been really excited on doing a video review of the console because there's some decent videos out there, but not really anything really going into depth on it with functions and kind of how it sounds. So, just right off the bat, the bulk of this video is going to be me actually running through a mix and running the mix into the summing section and just pushing the console so that you can hear how it actually sounds, because I'm sure that's what most people care about. And on top of that, we'll also go into the stereo compressor a little bit and how it incorporates into the mix bus, because this is their 527, so I didn't really have a lot of experience with those before coming in. And they seem kind of similar to a 2500, but they're not. It's a lot cleaner. And interesting enough, I believe it shares transformers and maybe a few other things with the master section. So after mixing a bunch of stuff on this over the last 2 months or so, I found that this is a huge part of making your master section, and your mixes sound huge, and you don't necessarily have to compress or go crazy. Just getting the dial to kind of tick and adding about 1 dB of compression can make a huge difference. So yeah, we'll go through. I've got a mix that I've already mixed, so I'll bounce it out as stems, and we'll run it through the summing section and see how that sounds. And then at the very end, I'll probably take a little bit of time just to talk about how I've incorporated the console into my setup, why I bought it, why it was a good fit for me, and a couple of little workarounds that I've found with it that really helped me out, and some cool routing things I don't think I've seen anyone else do. So hopefully it might give some other people some ideas if they're on the fence of this and trying to figure some stuff out. So yeah, it's a really cool little console, and I'm excited to do this. So let's just dive right in and let's hear how this thing sounds. All right, so like I said, I've already done a mix on this song. So I've basically bounced out 9 stems on this track. We're going to sum the electric guitar and the shaker onto one track because the electric only comes in a few times. But we're also going to be looping one section of the song just for consistency's sake. So at first, you're not going to hear the piano and you're not going to hear the bigger drums at the end. So I've got those muted. Now, my philosophy on stem mixing is that, number one, it makes things a lot easier to recall years down the line. You don't have to worry about the possibility of, plugins not working or something else like that. But my other philosophy for stem mixing is that it's kind of a psychological thing. So it takes you from having this session with like 80 tracks, and all of a sudden you're starting new with like 8 stereo tracks. So it's kind of just a refresh for your brain. It lets you just set some levels and kind of reset. And especially when you're working on a console like this, the biggest thing is that it takes my eyes off the computer screen so that I'm not looking at my mix anymore. I'm actually hearing it. So I'm sitting here with some tactile physical faders, and I'm doing my final checks on levels and everything. And even if you want to, some little automation as well. So that's one of many reasons that the box was very appealing to me, was because it helped me in that final step. And the other great thing about API consoles is that, unlike a lot of like other things, like maybe a vintage Neve sidecar or something like that, a lot of consoles, when you feed stuff into it, it comes out sounding very different, which is fantastic sometimes. That's great. But other times you want it to do a subtle thing. And the thing that I hear with API consoles is kind of a really subtle thing if you just drive the snot out of them. So let's go ahead and I'll pull up my mix. So the first thing you can do if you don't want to worry about fader recalls is that you can hit the 0 dB button, which basically bypasses the faders. You can do everything inside of your computer as if the console was not there, but you're still feeding through the console. So I know for a lot of sessions I've done that occasionally because I know recalls are going to be a pain. So let's start there. Let's just hear the mix at 0 dB.
that could break heartbeat.
Sorry about that. I missed the right side when the vocals starting in there. But that's a great feature. And obviously on the box too, you also have these LED meters so you can see how hard you're driving each channel, which I really like. That was a great addition. So let's just go ahead and start with something. The faders are back in the circuit now. Let's start with the beat. So this is a big 30-inch kick drum that I had in the room, and it's just kind of a repetitive beat. So let's start there. All right, that's around 0 dB, so that's just kind of a straight feed from Pro Tools. Right, I'm going to start driving this harder so you can hear what the console is doing. And in the meantime, I'm going to compensate by bringing the program fader down, the main one, to try to keep things level matched as I'm driving it. And again, keep in mind that all APIs are really subtle. I've mixed on 1608s. I mixed on the bigger AXSs. They, for all intents and purposes, they all have a similar kind of layout as in terms of how they're going to sound. If you mix 16 stereo tracks into this, it's going to sound the same as most of their other consoles. So subtlety. All right, here we go. Let's drive it. Now again, I don't know if some of these subtleties are going to come through after this gets loaded up to YouTube and everything, but I don't like using words to describe what this is doing because it's kind of like tape and a bunch of other things. It's not necessarily what it's doing to one thing. It's how it's kind of the sum of everything. So once you drive everything a lot, you start hearing it a lot more. But what I generally hear with APIs when you drive them harder, especially stuff with low-end content like that, you have a lot of headroom. You have so much headroom available. So you start driving, then all of a sudden you're hearing a little bit of kind of saturation added as you drive harder, and then all of a sudden you hit a wall where your low end disappears, and especially your high end gets rounded out really nice. So usually when I'm driving stuff hard, I like to start with something with a lot of low end content, like drums. I hit those pretty hard on the console until all of a sudden I hear the low end crap out on it, and then I back it off just a little bit and then mix around that. So let's just try that real quick. I'm going to start with the low end information, kind of hit that point, and then I'm going to add everything else in. All right, there's my point. I'm hearing the low end kind of start to disappear, so I'm going to back off. All right, that sounded about right to me. Getting some good saturation. That's subtle. And I'm not losing any low end, so I'm going to start mixing the other things around this.
held tight to the fire within, and I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within, and I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed.
All right. So I feel like I'm getting a pretty good saturated mix on here. We're going to move up to the 527 compressors. Now, again, these are really interesting. The circuit is kind of incorporated into the master section. So when I start using these on an overall mix, I've found that I like them more when I'm very subtle with them and think of them as an enhancement of the master section as opposed to maybe a compressor. That's kind of where I've found their sweet spot is. So we'll pull this mix back up that's driving the console pretty hard. I'm going to put this guy into the circuit, and I'm just going to kind of tickle the needle, so to speak. So we're only getting about 1 dB of compression or so. So here we go. Just a quick aside, since this was a funky sound, this is actually a bowed upright bass that I doubled and just did some weird stuff to it, and it's pretty much just looped through the whole song, so it's a weird, kind of cool sound.
Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within, and I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within, and I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within, and I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward.
All right, so like I was saying, I'm just getting, it's hitting about 1 dB of compression in most of the parts of the song. Every once in a while diving into 2, I'm driving it a little harder than I might normally. But a couple of things to point out about the 527. I really enjoy the thrust circuit. It's very similar to the 2500. The compression kind of ignores a lot of the low end, so that you can drive it a little harder and not have it pumping every time a big kick drum comes in. It's got kind of the new and old style. It's kind of a toss-up. I've used both of them pretty much the same amount of times. I don't know. But it just depends on the song, really. Hard and soft knee. I think the hard knee might be great for tracking. I haven't used these as much for tracking yet, but the soft knee has worked a lot better for me for mixing. So let's hear this. I hope you could hear it when I was taking it in and out, but let's compare a few things just going through it. Kind of subtle by itself, but definitely makes a bigger difference when everything's running. Let's try acoustic real quick.
checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within. And I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within.
All right, let's listen to that loop one more time real quick. And then I'm going to basically put the console back in 0 dB mode so that you can hear it driven right now and then just kind of normal pass through, which honestly is pretty clean if you're not driving stuff inside your DAW. So let's listen to it driven, then I'll change it to 0 dB on everything. All right, here we go.
Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within. And I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within. And I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within. And I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet. Lazy-eyed, awkward and thin, held tight to the fire within. And I'd been down this hall before with the checkered gray carpet.
All right. Well, the video is pretty long. We're going to leave it at that. Maybe I'll do a part 2 sometime, but hopefully that gives you an overall kind of idea of how this thing works, how the workflow is, and what it sounds like. But again, on its own, things are pretty subtle, but what I love about this thing is it's kind of a final step in your mix and kind of sprinkles that extra, a couple of percentage points over your mix. Especially when you start setting that and start mixing into it just subtly, man, it makes a huge, huge difference. And it shaves off some transients pretty in a nice kind of subtle way. You can tell in your waveforms, and that way when you get to mastering, you can kind of be a little bit more aggressive. And yeah, that's analog for you. And this is a great console. So yeah, thanks for watching.